Good evening, friends. Tonight, we're embarking on a journey, a quiet and peaceful journey into the long forgotten corners of history. So dim your lights, settle under your blanket, and allow yourself to drift into a time far away, where the air is filled with the soft hum of ancient rituals and the faint sound of a distant wind rustling through bamboo. As we explore the bizarre and unusual punishments of feudal Japan, let your mind wander gently, like a leaf floating on a calm river. This isn't a tale of violence or cruelty for the sake of shock. It's a calm exploration of the strange and surprising ways people in ancient Japan once met their fate. You might find it odd, even fascinating, but don't worry. It's all part of the soothing flow of history, unfolding one quiet detail at a time. If you find this calm journey helps you unwind, tap like and subscribe. Only if it feels right, of course. There's no rush here. Just let go and let history lull you into a peaceful slumber. Now, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let's drift back in time. Imagine it, the quiet serenity of ancient Japan, where cherry blossoms gently fall and the mountains hum with the promise of mystery. Life in the feudal era was an intricate dance of honor, power, and tradition. Yet, as with any society, there were punishments, some severe, others unexpected. And one of the most bizarre forms of punishment in feudal Japan, a punishment that makes one pause and wonder about the minds that conceived it, was the bamboo thrust. This strange method of punishment has its roots deep in Japan's history, where certain crimes were considered unforgivable, and the punishment, though terrifying, was meant to restore balance and maintain societal order. Picture this: a person, often a thief, a traitor, or someone who had defied the feudal law, was forced to endure an excruciating fate involving nothing more than the natural world around them. It's almost poetic in a way. The punishment meted out by something as simple as a plant. The bamboo plant, with its fast-growing nature and sharp edges, was the instrument of torture. The victim was bound to the ground in a certain way, typically in a position that made escape impossible. And then, beneath them, a bamboo shoot was planted. As the days passed, the bamboo grew rapidly, its sharp, pointed end thrusting upward, slowly but inevitably. Imagine the sensation: the thick, fibrous stalk pushing upwards, penetrating slowly through the body, driven by the relentless growth of nature itself. There was no way to avoid it. What makes this punishment so chilling is not just the slow, torturous nature of it, but the psychological element. The victim could feel the bamboo grow, could sense the pressure, and could hear the sound of its movement as it pushed upward. The slow but unstoppable force of nature was their only companion in those final moments, as they waited for the inevitable. It's a punishment that even today sends shivers down the spine. Yet, in the context of feudal Japan, it was seen as a fitting penalty for those who had broken the sacred rules of society. It was the final reminder that no one, no matter their status, could escape the consequences of their actions. And yet, as unsettling as this punishment may sound, there's something almost meditative about it when you stop to think about it. The rhythm of the bamboo's growth, the passage of time as it slowly took its course. These were the elements that would have kept the mind busy, even as the body suffered. It's strange to think that a punishment could be so slow, so deliberate, and yet so final. In a way, it mirrors the calm, inexorable march of time itself, unavoidable, but oddly peaceful in its certainty. Perhaps the bamboo thrust also speaks to the philosophy of the time, the idea of fate, the belief that one's actions could set the wheels of destiny in motion. Whether it was the punishment for a crime or simply the unending growth of nature, there was an inevitability to it, and in that inevitability, there was a kind of peace, as unsettling as that peace might be. The bamboo, by its very nature, was a symbol of resilience. It could bend and sway with the wind, but it would never break. And in this strange, torturous punishment, it was that very resilience that was twisted into something far darker. But still, as we ponder this, we might reflect on the way history has a way of looking different from the vantage point of time. The cruelty of the bamboo thrust seems almost like a distant, forgotten echo of an age when nature and human destiny were entwined in ways we might find difficult to understand. As we linger on this eerie method of punishment, let your mind float, as though the gentle winds of time are guiding you away from the pain of the past. And as we leave this first chapter of feudal Japan's punishments behind, think of the strange forces that shape history, the ebb and flow of time, and how sometimes the past seems so far removed from our present, even as it continues to shape us. Now, let your thoughts gently move to the next chapter, where we'll explore another strange and haunting punishment from this fascinating era. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine standing by a quiet stream in ancient Japan. The sun is setting, casting a soft golden light across the water as it ripples gently over smooth stones. The sound of water trickling creates a soothing melody, a perfect moment of peace. But now, let your mind drift to a darker thought. The very same water that brings tranquility can, in the hands of the shogun's men, become a tool of unrelenting torment. One of the most infamous, yet strangely peaceful in its slow torment, punishments of feudal Japan was water torture, a method employed in the shadows of the shogun's rule. It's hard to imagine how something as pure and essential as water could be turned into an instrument of pain. Yet, in the feudal era, it was the perfect way to break a person without leaving obvious marks. The beauty of water was that it could slip into every corner. It could be as gentle as a whisper, or as suffocating as the deepest ocean, all depending on how it was used. This water torture was not about drowning, not in the way you might picture. It was far subtler, a method that played on the mind's limits as much as the body's. It was a slow, excruciating process that involved a steady drip, drip, drip of water. Imagine sitting still in a dark, confined space, your hands bound tightly. You can hear the water begin to fall, one drop at a time, but it's not falling on your skin. No, it's falling onto your forehead, repeatedly, relentlessly. At first it's nothing, just a faint tap of water against your skin, barely noticeable. But as time drags on, you begin to feel the weight of each drop, the coolness, the rhythm. There's no escape from it. As you sit in silence, the sound of the water becomes louder, more insistent. Every drop a small tap against your mind, a small tap against your sanity. There's no way to stop it. It's not the water that hurts, it's the waiting, the constant pressure of knowing that the next drop will come, and the next, and the next. It's a method designed to break you not with pain, but with time. This was the technique known as tatsumaki. The victim was placed in a tight space, often a small dark room where the only sound was the water. Each drop was meant to grow in its significance until the victim's mind cracked. The isolation, the lack of escape, the relentless drip, over hours, sometimes days, would strip away all sense of control. The sound would become all-encompassing, the drop a constant reminder of how time was passing, how the pain was building in a way that couldn't be fought. It's hard to imagine the mental strain this kind of torture would have inflicted. Not a single blow was struck, not a drop of blood was shed, but the psychological pressure was enough to break even the strongest willed. You couldn't escape the sound. You couldn't escape the feeling of the water falling again and again, slowly driving you mad. Each drop was a tiny reminder of your helplessness, and the cumulative effect would wear down a person's defenses until they gave in. What's interesting, though, is how effective this method was. It wasn't just physical pain that was inflicted. It was a test of the mind, a contest between the person's willpower and the creeping effect of time. After all, we've all felt how time seems to stretch in moments of discomfort or dread. Now, imagine that stretch happening not in a few minutes, but over hours, days. The water was the ticking clock, its rhythm weaving itself into the very fabric of the victim's thoughts. There was no escape. There was no end, only the next drop. Despite its cruelty, there was a strange, almost poetic element to this punishment. It was as if the victim was being stripped of everything piece by piece, not through force, but through persistence. The water, like a soft, endless wave, would slowly erode the edges of a person's resolve. Just as the ocean shapes the land with its waves, so too would the water shape the person's mind, until it no longer resembled the person who had entered that room. Perhaps, in a way, the water torture was a reflection of the relentless nature of the feudal system itself. There was no escape from the rules, no way to avoid the consequences. Time, like water, would eventually catch up with you. In that sense, it was a fitting punishment for those who had defied the shogun's laws, who had dared to challenge the unbending order of the time. The water didn't care who you were. It only cared that you were there, and that you would eventually be worn down. But what is perhaps the most unsettling part of this punishment is the way it echoes the very nature of life. We all face moments of discomfort, of pressure, of waiting. And while most of us have the ability to walk away from our worries or turn our minds to something else, imagine being trapped in a small, dark space with nothing but the sound of a dripping faucet. No distractions, no escape. It's easy to see how something like this would break even the strongest mind. The mind, after all, is as much a part of our physical experience as the body. And when both are worn down, it can feel as though there's nothing left. The shogun's enemies, those unfortunate enough to face this kind of punishment, would have had nothing to hold on to. The drip of water was all that remained. As we reflect on this eerie method of torture, think of the quiet power of water, the way it can soothe or destroy depending on how it's used. The water torture of feudal Japan reminds us how the simplest of things can have unimaginable effects. And yet, even as we close the chapter on this method of punishment, we are reminded that the human mind too is a force that can be shaped by the smallest of moments. And now, as we leave the relentless drip of water behind, let your mind wander to the next chapter. Let it drift gently, like a leaf carried on a quiet current, as we explore another strange and bizarre punishment from feudal Japan. Imagine the faint rustle of the leaves outside your window, the soft, cool air that stirs them. You're tucked comfortably under a blanket, but for just a moment, let your mind wander far from the present and travel back in time. Picture yourself walking through the streets of feudal Japan, an era where life was meticulously organized, and the line between honor and punishment was drawn in the sand. Here, the smallest offense could lead to a punishment so bizarre, so strange, that it might feel as though the very earth was conspiring to erase you. One such punishment is known only to a few. The coffin prison. This isn't the kind of prison where you're locked behind iron bars or thrown into a cell with cold stone walls. No, the coffin prison was something much more intimate. It was not about isolating you in a cold, damp place. It was about forcing you to confront your own mortality in a way that nothing else could. The coffin was a prison, but it was also a reminder of your place in the world, a reminder that no matter how high you may rise, you would always be subject to the laws of nature and society. Imagine, if you will, being placed into a small wooden coffin. The air feels thin, and the darkness is thick, closing in around you. The coffin is small, barely big enough for you to move. There is no room to stretch your arms, no space to shift your legs. You are bound tightly within it, forced to lie still. At first, the sensation of being trapped is strange. You try to shift, but there's no room. You try to breathe deeply, but it's hard. The air feels stale. The coffin is your entire world now, and it will be for the next days, or even weeks. This was a punishment reserved for those who had deeply offended the samurai class or defied the shogun's laws. It wasn't about physical pain at first. It was about the psychological pressure, the slow degradation of one's mind. For the victim of the coffin prison, time lost all meaning. Hours blurred into days, days into weeks. The only things you could do were think, breathe, and wait. There was no way to escape, no chance to turn away from the suffocating darkness that surrounded you. You had nothing to do but wait. Wait for what? You didn't know. The only thing you could rely on was the passage of time. And this is where the real terror of the coffin prison lay, not in the confinement itself, but in what it forced you to confront, your own fear of death. In a society that was so focused on honor and the afterlife, where death was never far from a samurai's mind, this form of punishment was the ultimate test. You were forced to reckon with the fact that, no matter your rank or station, you were still subject to the same laws of nature that govern us all. In a sense, it was a punishment designed to strip away all pretenses, leaving the person to face their most primal fears. Claustrophobia, isolation, and mortality itself. For some, the mere act of being confined to the coffin for an extended period was enough to drive them mad. The stifling air, the complete lack of movement, the silence, all these elements slowly wore away at the mind. The body might remain intact, but the mind would begin to unravel. The isolation was absolute. There was no contact with anyone else, no comfort, no companionship. Only you, alone with your thoughts, trapped in a box that felt as if it would never end. And yet, for others, the coffin prison wasn't just about the mind. It was about testing the limits of endurance. Some victims were kept in their coffins for weeks, sometimes even longer, with only minimal food or water provided. The lack of sustenance would leave them weak and delirious. Their bodies, once strong and capable, would become frail and fragile. The coffin itself was a constant reminder of the fragility of life, and the slow erosion of strength was, in a strange way, the punishment's true horror. There was also the social aspect to the punishment. In feudal Japan, honor was everything. A samurai's reputation was built on their ability to maintain their dignity and respect in all circumstances. To be locked in a coffin, left to rot in solitude, was a public display of a person's fall from grace. The coffin prison stripped away any semblance of status or honor, leaving the individual alone with their shame. And for those who survived the experience, it was said that the psychological scars remained long after they were released. The image of the coffin would haunt them, even when they were free once more. But in a way, the coffin prison was also a strange reflection of the society that used it. Feudal Japan was a place where the value of a person was often determined by their ability to contribute to society, to uphold their obligations, and to maintain a sense of honor. The coffin was, in its own way, a reminder of this. When you broke the rules, you not only betrayed society, but you betrayed yourself. The coffin didn't just hold you physically, it held you in the grip of your own conscience. Yet, as unsettling as this punishment may seem, there is a certain quiet dignity to it. In a way, it was a form of reflection. A person placed in the coffin was given the time to think about their actions, to ponder their place in the world. Perhaps this punishment was not meant to be a harsh retribution, but a slow, meditative process designed to lead the person back to humility and understanding. After all, isn't that what true punishment is? A chance to reflect, to learn, and to grow. As we contemplate this strange and haunting punishment, think about the silence of the coffin. The air thick and quiet, the darkness so complete that even your thoughts seem distant. The coffin prison didn't need to inflict physical pain. It simply required you to face the slow passage of time, to confront your own fear of death, and to emerge from the experience, if you were lucky, changed. And now, as we leave the heavy silence of the coffin behind, let your mind drift away, as though the darkness is gently lifting. We'll move to the next chapter, where another bizarre punishment awaits. One that might sound strange, but in its own way makes perfect sense in the world of feudal Japan. Imagine a quiet moonlit night in the heart of feudal Japan. The air is crisp, and the sounds of crickets fill the stillness. Everything around you seems peaceful, so serene, so calm. But then, as your eyes adjust to the shadows, you notice something strange, almost haunting in the distance. A dark figure standing against the soft glow of a nearby lantern. It's not a person, but something else. Something metal, something ancient. It looks almost like a tall, ominous cabinet with strange shapes and metal spikes protruding from every corner. The Iron Maiden, a name that might conjure images of medieval Europe, was also part of Japan's brutal history of punishment. It's said that this iron contraption was used not for execution, but for a slow and agonizing form of torment designed to break the body and mind. The Iron Maiden of the samurai was a tool of punishment so eerie that just imagining it stirs something deep within. And yet, unlike its European counterpart, the Japanese version was less about gore and more about psychological terror. Now, let me take you into the dark, twisted world of this instrument of torment. Imagine being bound, your arms held firmly to your sides, and forced to step into the cold metal structure. The inside of the Iron Maiden was lined with sharp, gleaming spikes, each one positioned strategically to cause maximum pain without being fatal, at least not immediately. You might think the spikes were there to pierce you in a direct, brutal way, but no. The way they were arranged ensured that your body would be painfully prodded and poked in the most excruciating ways possible, without immediate death. It was as if the design itself was meant to stretch time, to draw out the agony with every moment spent inside. The worst part of this torment wasn't just the physical pain, but the constant fear of what might happen next. Each spike was positioned just enough to pierce your skin, but avoid vital organs. At least, that was the intention. The pain would grow as you were pressed tightly inside, each breath coming harder as the metal pressed against your chest. You couldn't escape. The Iron Maiden was a cage of your own making. Your body was trapped, and your mind was forced to reckon with the uncertainty of how long you could endure. Would you break first physically or mentally? There was no way to know, and that was the true cruelty of the Iron Maiden. It wasn't about causing death. It was about extending the process of dying. But what makes this particular method of punishment so unsettling is the psychological effect it must have had on those who endured it. Imagine being locked inside a dark, confined space. The pressure of the metal against your body, the constant slow puncturing of your skin, the fear of never knowing how long the agony would last. This must have driven the mind to madness. Every second felt like an eternity, and in the silence of the darkened chamber, every moment of pain would have seemed to stretch on forever. It wasn't just the body being broken, it was the mind, the spirit, that was under siege. The Iron Maiden was particularly effective for those who had committed acts of betrayal against the shogun or the samurai class. For the samurai, a betrayal wasn't just a personal offense, it was a stain on the honor of an entire family. The Iron Maiden wasn't just a punishment, it was a way to ensure that the disgrace would never be forgotten. Being placed in the contraption was a symbol that you, as a person, were no longer seen as human. You were reduced to a vessel of suffering, your pain a reflection of the dishonor you had brought upon yourself and your family. It was a brutal, merciless statement, a warning to others. Now, as strange as it might sound, the Iron Maiden was not used exclusively for punishment in its most extreme form. In some cases, it was used for testing the strength and endurance of a samurai or a prisoner. Imagine being put inside, but not knowing whether this was a test or the beginning of your final moments. That uncertainty, the lack of control, was as terrifying as the spikes themselves. It was as though you were suspended between life and death, forced to confront your own limitations. In feudal Japan, the concept of honor was paramount. The Iron Maiden was designed not just to punish, it was designed to humiliate. It was the final act of degradation, stripping the individual of their dignity and forcing them to confront the true cost of their transgressions. If you survived, you were left broken, both physically and mentally. If you didn't, your death was a symbol of the price paid for betrayal, a dark warning to anyone who might think to follow in your footsteps. There's something eerie about the Iron Maiden. It's not the violence of it that gets under your skin, but the waiting, the stillness. It's as if the very air within the contraption is filled with the weight of time. Each breath you take feels heavy, with the uncertainty of whether you will escape or be consumed by the sharp metal that surrounds you. The feeling of helplessness would have been overwhelming, as though the very structure was designed not just to punish the body, but to break the spirit in a way that nothing else could. And when you think of it in those terms, the Iron Maiden becomes more than just a relic of history. It's a symbol of the human experience itself, the way we endure pain, fear, and uncertainty. It serves as a reminder that no matter how far we've come, the darkest parts of our past are never truly gone. The fear, the torment, the psychological breakdown, they are all still very much a part of who we are. Perhaps that's why the Iron Maiden is so haunting. It's not just a tool of punishment, it's a mirror. As we close this chapter on the Iron Maiden, let your thoughts gently wander to the next punishment, where another strange, eerie method awaits. A punishment so uniquely cruel, it seems almost impossible to comprehend. Let your mind relax, and as you take one more breath, feel the quiet calm return as we continue this journey through feudal Japan's most bizarre forms of punishment. Imagine standing at the edge of a cliff, the cool night air brushing against your face as you gaze out over the landscape below. The moonlight glimmers on the water, the shadows of trees stretching far into the distance. Now let that vision shift. Imagine that instead of standing free, you are bound, your hands tied tightly behind your back, and you are standing at the very edge, ready to be pulled down into the unknown. This, my friends, is the scene of one of the most terrifying and bizarre punishments of feudal Japan, the rope-drawn descent. To the modern mind, it seems like the stuff of nightmares, but to the samurai and the criminals who fell under their rule, it was a calculated method of inflicting terror and suffering without ever needing to draw a sword. It was a punishment not just for the body, but for the soul. The rope-drawn descent was reserved for those who had committed the gravest offenses, often betrayal, or crimes that had dishonored the samurai code. The punishment began with the victim being tied to a long, strong rope, and the other end of that rope was attached to a sturdy post or a crane. The person would then be hoisted up, high into the air, with their body hanging suspended. Picture it, the wind blowing against your face, the feeling of weightlessness as you are lifted off the ground, your body swaying gently in the breeze. But then, without warning, you would be dropped. The drop itself was not meant to be fatal, but the victim had no idea how far the descent would take them. The fear of the unknown, the terror of falling into an abyss, unsure of what awaited them below, was one of the most chilling aspects of this punishment. Would you fall to your death? Or would you land in a pit filled with sharp stones? Or perhaps a river filled with treacherous currents? The rope was the only thing that connected you to life, and with each moment, the tension would grow, until the very rope that had lifted you up became the very thing that pulled you down. But here's the thing. The rope-drawn descent wasn't about the fall itself. No, the fall was just the beginning. The true horror lay in the suspension. You were not allowed to reach the ground quickly, not allowed the relief of hitting solid earth beneath your feet. Instead, the rope would be drawn in such a way that your descent was slow, agonizing. The moments of free fall might be brief, but the uncertainty, the terrifyingly slow descent, would leave you suspended, with no control over your own fate. Every inch you fell was a reminder of your helplessness, and every moment you hung in the air was a moment you were forced to confront the potential consequences of your crimes. For those who were sentenced to the rope-drawn descent, there was no guarantee of survival. The fall, while not intended to kill, was still perilous. The ground below was often uneven, full of hidden dangers that would turn an already torturous fall into something even more deadly. If you were lucky, you would land in a pit designed to slow your fall. If you were unlucky, the fall would bring you into contact with jagged rocks or into a swift-moving river, where death might claim you in an instant. But the slow descent, the waiting, was what made this punishment so harrowing. The victim's mind was forced to grapple with every moment, every inch of their fall. They had no control. They could not stop their descent, and they could not see what awaited them below. Every breath, every second, was filled with the cold terror of the unknown. The body might not have been physically tortured, but the mind, the mind was pushed to its very limits. The samurai who administered the rope-drawn descent understood that the mental strain was just as important as the physical one. The fear of falling was universal. Every person who had ever looked over the edge of a cliff understood the terror of a potential fall. But in this punishment, that fear was amplified. It was as if the rope itself was a constant reminder of how fragile life was, how fleeting our moments of safety can be. The moment the rope was tightened, the victim was suspended between life and death, caught in a limbo of uncertainty, with nothing but the cold weight of fear to accompany them. But beyond the fear, there was also the psychological effect of being so utterly vulnerable. The rope-drawn descent stripped away any dignity a person might have had. In a society that placed such great value on honor, the sensation of being suspended, helpless, vulnerable, was a deep blow to one's sense of self. It was as if the body was being dragged through a slow, agonizing loss of control, one painful inch at a time. The victim was left dangling, a puppet with no strings to cut, no way to end their suffering but through the passage of time. Perhaps this punishment was also meant to reflect the fragility of power itself. The samurai were, after all, the most powerful warriors in feudal Japan, but even they were subject to the whims of fate, to the pull of the rope that could bring them to the ground, no matter how high they soared. The rope-drawn descent was a reminder that no one was invincible, not even the mighty samurai. And as much as the victim's fear and suffering were the focus of the punishment, it's worth remembering that the rope-drawn descent wasn't just about breaking a person. It was about making an example. It was about sending a message to everyone who witnessed it. The shogun and his samurai wanted the people to know that there was no escaping the consequences of dishonor. No matter where you tried to hide, no matter how far you ran, the rope would find you. As we reflect on this eerie and unsettling punishment, it's hard not to feel a shiver at the thought of being suspended in midair, the tension of the rope pulling you slowly downward, the waiting, the fear, the uncertainty. It's a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying things aren't what you know will happen, but the things you can't predict, the things that are out of your control. And now, as we slowly release the tension of this chapter and let the image of the slow descent fade from our minds, let your thoughts drift toward the final punishment we will explore in this journey. It is one that, in its strangeness, will perhaps leave you with more questions than answers. So relax, breathe deeply, and let the quiet flow of time guide you gently into the next chapter. As the night settles in, picture yourself in a quiet, dark room. The soft rustle of the wind outside barely breaks the silence. It's peaceful, almost too peaceful. But now, let's shift our focus, take a step away from the tranquility of the present moment, and journey back to a time where darkness held a very different meaning. A time in feudal Japan, where punishment was not just about pain or suffering. It could also be about spectacle, about sending a message in a way that would haunt the souls of those who witnessed it. One of the most bizarre, yet oddly captivating forms of execution was the dancing execution, a punishment so strange and psychologically complex that it's hard to imagine it occurring in any time other than the rigid, honor-bound society of the samurai. This wasn't a quick, quiet death. No, the dancing execution was a form of execution that involved a strange, almost ritualistic display of the victim's last moments. A performance, if you will, that left an indelible mark on everyone who witnessed it. Imagine this: the condemned person is bound, their arms tied in front of them, and placed in the middle of a crowd. But this is no typical execution. No, this victim is forced to dance before they die. The executioner, in a cruel twist, would often lead the condemned through a series of slow, agonizing movements, as if forcing them to put on a grotesque performance in the moments before their death. What makes the dancing execution so eerie is not just the visual of a person moving and swaying before their end, but the psychological toll it would have taken on the victim. There is a strange, almost absurd nature to the situation. You're about to die, yet you must move as though everything is fine, as though you are still alive. The dance would often involve exaggerated steps, awkward, contorted postures that made it clear to everyone that this wasn't a graceful, celebratory act. It was a grotesque parody of life, a cruel mockery of what was about to come. As the victim was forced to move, every step they took was a step closer to their demise. Their movements were dictated by the whims of the executioner, and often they were made to perform in front of an audience, those who had committed the same crimes as they, or those who had simply come to witness the spectacle. To dance in this way, knowing that death was looming just a few moments away, would have been unbearable. The mind would spiral with thoughts of what was to come, but there was no escape. The dance went on, no matter how much the victim wanted to stop, no matter how desperately they wished to collapse from the weight of their fate. It's almost as though the dancing execution was a way for the samurai to show their dominance over life and death itself. They didn't just end someone's life, they controlled how that life would end. The victim wasn't allowed to die quietly. No, they had to perform, to entertain, to fulfill their final role in a play that they could neither rewrite nor escape. The very nature of this punishment was designed to strip away all dignity. The condemned wasn't just losing their life, they were losing their humanity, being reduced to nothing more than a puppet in the hands of those who held power over them. But there was a deeper psychological effect at play. For the victim, there would have been no worse fate than being forced to dance in such a way. It wasn't enough to die. They had to face their own fear, their own helplessness before the audience. It was a final test of endurance and willpower. Could you keep your composure as the inevitable neared? Could you still hold your head high, even as your body was slowly racked with the knowledge of what was to come? It's a question of ultimate vulnerability, the feeling of being utterly exposed, forced to perform for others as if death were just another step in a public ritual. For those who witnessed the dancing execution, the horror was not just in watching a person die. It was in seeing someone so thoroughly stripped of their control, their dignity. The act of dancing before death wasn't just a spectacle. It was a reminder of how fragile life could be, how easily a person's existence could be reduced to a few moments of performance, a few steps of dance, before they were snuffed out. And that is what made this execution so deeply unsettling. It wasn't just about the death. It was about the loss of control, the overwhelming realization that even in the face of the end, you were still expected to play a part. But perhaps, in some twisted way, the dancing execution was also about honor. The samurai and the shogun's court believed that even in the face of death, one's grace, poise, and dignity must be upheld. The victim, forced to perform in this way, was a living testament to the idea that no matter the situation, one should never lose their sense of composure. Even when death was certain, even when there was no way out, you must perform your final act with honor. It was a reminder to all who watched. Death might be inevitable, but how you face it is what truly matters. As we leave behind the haunting image of the dancing execution, a final performance of life and death, we can reflect on the incredible, sometimes unsettling ways that feudal Japan sought to control the fate of those who had broken their laws. The punishments were not simply about inflicting pain or suffering. They were about control, about sending a message to everyone who might dare to cross the line. As we draw this journey through history to a close, may these strange and eerie punishments remind us of how far society has come, and yet how much history still shapes the present. The punishments of feudal Japan, with their bizarre rituals and psychological tolls, stand as a testament to the ways in which power, fear, and honor shaped the lives of those who lived in that time. May these memories guide you into peaceful dreams, where the quiet whispers of history fade gently into the background of your mind. If this journey helped you unwind, feel free to let me know in the comments below. And if you're still awake, sweet dreams await. Remember, there is no rush here. Take your time, breathe deeply, and allow yourself to slip into the calm embrace of the night. Good night, my friends. Sweet dreams.